In the last episode, we talked about how I, and maybe even you, rewrote the memories of childhood so they would fit the narrative we crafted about it as an adult, and what happens when childhood photographs begin to poke holes in the story we created. We also talked about some of the challenges of monetizing our work to the point where we can actually make a living as an artist. In this conversation, we're talking about the ideas of urgent versus important when it comes to the work we make, and how social media tends to encourage and often reward one over the other. I'm Jeffrey Sidoris, I'm talking to John Wilkening, and this is In Between. So what are we going to burn down this time? We've successfully burned down my childhood and your value and monetizing your work.
Yeah, I know. Like, how do we wade into equally as deep waters as that conversation? But I actually have something, and it was based off of this guy by the name of Alistair Humphreys, who's sort of made a name for himself in England. He's like walked across, I think maybe a continent, or like he does all these crazy trips and then writes about them.
Are they all walking trips?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what the one that defined it, like jump started his career. But he put out a video that I found where he's attempting to write another book, and he talks about like him trying to write this book and then struggling with it. The question he posed that sort of got my head thinking is he basically titled this video where he went to this cabin in the middle of the Scottish Highlands with no electricity, no running water. The only heat is wood. And he, I guess, like brought enough battery in his laptop to write. And he titled the video Urgent versus Important, and how he talks about struggling when he was at home writing this book because everyone's hitting him up for something to do, you know,
asking him to do something.
Yeah.
You mean? Okay.
Yeah. Or questions, or like just, you know, quote unquote urgent things that we feel we need to put our attention to that distract us from actually doing the important work that sort of pushes our career forward. And that struck a nerve with me because I feel, especially with like in a social media context, that it's so easy to get lost in the like, I need urgent stuff, like I need to post something on social media every day. I need to reply to these people. I need to do all this sort of stuff. I need to put an Instagram story about what I'm doing. You know, like all the stuff that in a sense weighs on our time, but how much of that is actually important? Like how much is that actually moving the needle in our work?
I think it's a false sense of urgency. I think that's the biggest negative that social media has created, is a false sense of urgency that is distracting from what is important or potentially important. I mean, important's a strange word because we first have to define what do we mean by important? Important to whom? Important to an audience? Important to us as the makers of the work? Or a blend of something in between? Because if you're depending on social media, this is something that I've wrestled with myself. If you're depending on social media, does social media taint the purity of what you're doing because you're on some level pandering to an audience?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer to that question. It is really a question that I'm wrestling with. So there's that part of it. But yeah, the urgency piece, you know, when blogs were still a thing before social media, and some would argue that they still are, but they're certainly not as important as they once were with the advent of social media. But when they were important, the rule was you had to do multiple blog posts per week, right? To stay relevant or to stay high up on the rankings, the way Google was then indexing or referencing sites. And there had to be link backs to other sites, and other people had to sort of verify that you were important or air quotes important. But all that has kind of changed now. There are multiple posts a day in some cases that are required to stay in front, partially because things are moving by so fast. If you don't go to Instagram for a few days, God forbid, but if you don't go to Instagram for a few days, there's no way you're going to catch up on everything that has come down that activity feed from the people that you follow. There's just too much stuff. So the urgency is to, in my opinion anyway, is to post and post and post and post so that you have more of a chance of being seen by that audience.
Yeah.
But again, that seems to dilute the overall importance of the work. If you're posting, how about this, John? If you're posting as a byproduct of doing the work, if you're doing the work anyway and posting it as you go, I guess that's one thing. But if you're creating this sort of ancillary body of work or ancillary feed just to keep eyes on your work while you're working on the important, again in quotes, the important stuff over here, then it just seems to be a distraction.
Yeah. It feels a lot like being forced to tread water, where there's this pressure to continually put stuff out in order to stay in front of people. And the thing that, I'm wrestling with, what is the cost of that treading water? What are you...
In what way? Cost in what way? Material cost? Emotional cost?
Time, decision making. They talk about decision fatigue, that human beings only have a certain amount of decisions they can make in a particular day before they just get worn out. And that's why certain people have argued that it's better for you to basically eat the same breakfast, almost have a uniform, so that you mentally can start your day without having to go, okay, what am I eating for breakfast? What am I wearing?
Right.
Like all that sort of stuff. And that there's this toll on us mentally that is not, we don't consider it when we look at, say, the cost of social media. And that the question that I'm sort of posing is, does our work pay that price? Could we theoretically get better work without having to with treading less water? What would actually push our careers forward or our work forward?
Yeah, the career part you don't know though, right? I mean, that's something that's kind of out of your hands. The work part, yes, I think you can address that. But as to what an audience is going to like, I mean, you and I have had hundreds of hours of talking about that, and I don't know that there is an answer to that particular question. I mean, if that were the case, then we would never make any bad work because we would know what an audience wants, right? And well, if that's your career goal is to please an audience, let me back up and sort of rephrase that.
But let's put it as the work in and of itself, and it's almost like a pure way. I would have to say that there has to be a price in terms of creativity that gets paid for this tread in the water.
Yeah. I think you're right. Some people do it really well. I don't think I do. And maybe it's because I haven't really had a strategy. Adrienne is a very strategic thinker. She's brilliant. And she is able to see multiple steps ahead. Whereas I typically don't. I'm focused on what's in front of me. I'm focused on the more immediate. Is this a pixel to the left or is this a pixel to the right? Is this color too orange, not orange enough, too green? Whereas she's looking at how this all plays out and where it could possibly end up and what kind of message it sends and how these, 18 things are interrelated. And again, she's really wonderful at it, but I'm not. And I think that's part of the reason why creativity as a business is such a struggle for me, because I don't I don't have those. Actually, maybe that's not. It's not even that I don't. I mean, it is that I don't have the skills, but I don't have the skills because I don't focus on those skills. I don't exercise those muscles. I'm in my own head. I'm too busy trying to exercise the creative muscles to make the work to lesser or greater degree.
Yeah.
But the people that are good at it, really good at it, and can be that creative entrepreneur, and I don't mean that as in that sort of pejorative. I don't mean it as a negative. I know sometimes that is tossed around by the real true artists, right? That you can't be a creative entrepreneur because then you're just, you're selling out. Well, that's another discussion. But I don't think like that. I don't have that skill set, I guess.
Do you think that when I look at a certain segment of creatives out there, I feel that success on social media almost becomes a trap creatively. And perfect example is sort of like pretty place photography. The girl with the yellow coat in front of a lake with a gorgeous mountain in the background.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost a certain set of photographs that are almost repeated ad nauseum by a segment of photographers, often with sizable followings. But when you look at their feed, you don't see you don't see the progression that you would expect artistically.
Maybe, but if
or at least that's how I feel.
Yeah, no. I can completely see that. But if their market, if who they're creating that work for, if those clients or customers really love pretty lakes and yellow coats, or those types of images, and they're getting that work out there consistently and being paid for it, on some level it's hard to fault them, because why change?
Mm-hmm.
If your goal is to make a living with a camera, that's the goal, right? I mean, I think it comes down to what you want out of, when we talk about, living a creative life, we have to define that. What does that mean? If it means making a living with a camera in your hand, and that's the win, the subject matter, while important, isn't the win. The win is I made a living with a camera in my hand. That's the win. Well, then maybe you're willing to compromise on the what, because for you, the how is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas for you personally, the how, and please tell me I'm full of shit if I am, but the how seems to be secondary to the what. It's tied to it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, there's a certain level with art where I definitely hit a point where I almost I get tired of my own bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Where if I know how to make an image and there's no surprise, there's no difficulty, it's just like I know exactly what I want to do and how to execute it, and I can repeat it sort of in an infinite. That state is almost the opposite of joy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how to just.
No, I believe that 100% for you.
Work becomes a burden rather than something that lights me up.
Right.
I have to almost walk a fine line between being something that's difficult and something that's being too difficult. Because, I know that if I keep on pushing a project and it's one of those where like I can't figure it out, it reaches a point where it's almost like I get too beaten down to keep on pushing at it. But at the same time, that struggle is also what makes the sort of the successes so pure and so like exhilarating.
Mm-hmm.
In some respects, like I shoot film because digital was so easy. And I know that's a ridiculous statement.
Millions of photographers just gasped in horror.
I know. And like I know all opinions expressed are my own.
Yeah. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of yeah.
But like, I had the 5D, and like when I click the image, it will click the shutter. It's like you can look at the back and go, okay, there was no challenge to the pure producing of an image.
Mm-hmm.
And
was there ever for you in digital?
Yes and no. When I first started, there was just the like, how do you create an interesting photo?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's that sort of thing to bump your head against. But personally, I needed a constraint to push against.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I needed an obstacle to sort of wrestle with, to sort of push me get me into the zone, you know. And I felt that the ease at which I could produce an image with a digital camera didn't awaken the same sort of feelings.
And was it immediate for you, the film part? I mean, because it's hard for me to compare the two because I haven't been serious about shooting film since I was serious about shooting film, since
Sure.
film was all there was. So I don't
Hmm.
feel like there's been a fair comparison of experience because there was 20 years between the two experiences.
Yeah. To me, there's a moment just right before you pull, like when you're developing in your images, when you're about ready to pull them out of the tank to see if you got anything on them. Even after I've shot hundreds and hundreds of rolls of film, there's always a feeling of, did I mess this one up?
But you get excitement from that, not sort of nervous angst. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that sort of unknown, I get excited about it. And I mean, I've definitely pulled rolls of film out that I've messed up, and that's when you start kicking things around in the basement. But it's almost that.
Go back to that for a second. I mean, if it's part of the process, then why does it come as a surprise that it doesn't work perfectly if imperfection is such an integral part of the film process?
Because because failure, no matter whether it's necessary or not, feels like shit. You like, it's it's like the difference between riding a bike with training wheels and riding it without.
Mm-hmm.
No one likes crashing into the bushes, but everyone accepts that the training wheels are riding without with the training wheels on is not fun. It's this sort of like unsaid acknowledgement that the reason riding a bike is fun because of the possibility of crashing.
Hmm. In a weird way, maybe because I've been looking for ways to integrate digital photography into my analog painting or mixed media work. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's one of the reasons that I find myself drawn to the alternative processes that I've been researching lately, the gum bichromates and the salt prints and the carbon prints, because I can go out and get the images, well, staying in this line of discussion, more easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm shooting digital, but I still get to exercise those analog creative muscles by printing in the analog space
Mm-hmm.
with a process that's still chemical based, that still has a high degree of, oh no, I've blown it factor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what makes it so intriguing for me. And watching some of these videos, specifically the gum bichromate and gum oil process, where especially gum oil, because you create this solution, you expose the print, you can't see it because there's no pigment in the solution, even once it's been exposed. Then you have to rub oil paint into the thing, let that soak in. And it's only then when you wipe away that paint do you see whether or not you've gotten anything. So you've put in days worth of work, but by the time you pre-shrink the paper, coat it, let it dry, all these steps that go into it, you've put some significant time into it, only to then wipe it away and go, my exposure was off by 4 seconds or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I love that part. I mean, it's sort of core to why I work with these kinds of things, that sense of unpredictability is exactly what I need because I'm so pixel obsessed on the other side.
Yeah. Like when you compare how you feel about digital photography with sort of the very manual, messy process of your paintings, do you think that sort of, I don't even know what I'm trying to get at here, but like it feels like you approach the two very differently.
Digital
And
photography and painting? Is that the
yeah,
yeah, okay.
digital photography, and then the way you paint in such a messy fashion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've watched plenty of your sort of Instagram videos where you're painting,
Right.
and you're putting things down, painting it, painting over it, messing it up, redoing some corner. Like there are plenty of times when I've seen a painting on, say, like day 2, and it's unrecognizable on day 5,
Right.
and then it's also unrecognizable on day 13. Like, in that approach is so you, but also so not your digital photography.
No, I mean, Jesus, how many conversations did we have about cameras? and you know, well, this one looks better at 3200 ISO, and that one well, like, who cares? I don't shoot at 32 or 64. I mean, once in a blue moon, and yet when I was looking for a new camera, I wasn't testing and shooting comparison images at 200, 400, 800, 1600. It was 32 and 64. Like that became the benchmark. Like, you know, why isn't this Micro Four Thirds camera tack sharp at 6400 ISO, you know, in low light on my front lawn? Well, because it's a Micro Four Thirds camera at 6400 ISO on low light in your front lawn. That's why. And you're never ever going to shoot that shot again. Yet those became my test shots. I was looking for a level of pixel perfection that's completely contrary to not only the paintings, but to the way I take pictures. I'm never going to use that camera in that way. That became the hill that I needed to die on in terms of choosing. And I don't understand why.
Yeah. Do you know what it would look like if you approached your photography more like how you approach your painting? Has that question come up in your head?
I would probably shoot with an 8x10 camera with a lens that has been beat to hell and shoot wet plate. That would be I think wet plate is the closest photographic equivalent to the way I'm trying to carve out a body of work as a painter, if I'm even a painter, and I wrestle with that too. But I think that's probably the closest, but I also don't want to lug around an 8x10 camera and a push cart full of toxic chemicals. That doesn't work, at least at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where the alternative printing processes have found their way to center stage, because then I can just take my camera, toss it in a bag, go into DC, go to Anacostia, go to, you know, wherever it is that I'm going, get the photos that I want to get, then come back. And this is where I can capture the images and then come back home. And that's where the photography begins.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of your, like, if you want to say your paintings start with you collecting resource materials, but like that the final image or what you come away with from that is so different than the actual resources that
in many cases unrecognizable.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and that's, you know, going back to the top of the question about urgency versus importance. I could share progress images and have before, but I don't think I will moving forward, because they're not indicative of the final product, and it's just me having something to share.
Mm.
And I don't know that I want to take that position any longer. You know, I mean,
why? Like, just what's the thought process behind that decision?
Well, number one, as you've pointed out, a painting will be different on day 5 or day 10 or day 20 or whatever than it was on day 2 or 3. So on some level, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Why show you what it looks like right now when it's not going to look anything like that when it's done? And if you get it in your head that that's the snapshot that you like, and then I show you the final piece and you go, oh, wow, that really changed. I really liked it, you know, a week ago when it was at this stage.
Yeah.
Now, if I could see a point in doing like a whole BTS type thing on a particular piece and showing that whole progression in one go and then ending on the final piece, but sharing snapshots of them, it's almost like photographically, it would be the same thing as just putting up the raw file and then sharing the final edit. Well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Other than as some sort of exercise, like why would you do that? Some people's raw files are so different than where their final files end up, especially if you're shooting HDR or if you're compositing or, if you're doing a lot of beauty or retouching work, they're completely different images. So why bother? And I think I've kind of reached that with where I'm at with what I make. And it also, again, to go back to that kind of top, it takes away the urgency and lets me focus more on the importance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about sharing this side. I can share blurry pictures of my Christmas tree or pictures of the dog or, whatever. Now, does that build an audience or build a brand? No, probably not. But again, that's my lack of strategic thinking around it. And it's just more of that sort of squirrel mentality. It's like, oh, I took a picture, I should share it. Well,
yeah.
Why? Why should you share it?
Yeah.
And I think that's a question that we should all kind of ask ourselves. Why am I sharing this?
Yeah, part of me feels like I've stepped on a hamster wheel, and then I'm somehow indebted to keep the hamster wheel going.
The hamster wheel being social media and kind of posting things? Yeah.
And part of me just goes, maybe we just need, like, maybe the hamster wheel is what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the same time, I totally understand and accept how social media has in some ways replaced the gatekeepers in the art industry or the art world. You could create a following and then have a brand hit you up, and now you have a career based off of it. Like, I understand that the upside of social media. I just wonder, how much do we actually consider the downside in terms of it getting in the way of our work?
Right.
And it not even to expand it more from away from social media, how often do we get distracted by shiny elements within our work that sort of pushes away from the important aspects in our work?
Well, I mean, again, that word important, I feel like that's the core of it, because for some people, I go on and on about narrative and story, and I know, but I'm also quick to point out and remind myself that not everybody wants to have narrative in their work. Not everybody needs to have narrative in their work. Not everybody is looking to say something with their work other than, here's a pretty picture. And that's enough. And that's okay. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
If your bag is painting pretty, did Monet have some great existential message that he was trying to share with the world when he was painting water lilies? I don't know. I don't think so. I think he just liked painting pretty pictures. And I'm sure some Monet expert is going to write and go, oh, no, actually, Jeffrey, that's incorrect. Monet was trying to, whatever. And that's, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think there are plenty of artists for whom it's just about creating. It's just about making something. The important part is that I finished this thing and put it into the world. That's what's important.
Do you think the work feels less important to us if we can't share it on social media?
Say that again. Do I think the work,
so
our own work or other people's work?
Your own work.
Does my own work feel less important if I can't share it on social media? I think it's a double-edged sword. I think if, because you can rationalize it, right? We're really good. Humans are really good at rationalizing things. If 5,000 people take the millisecond to click the heart button, well, then you go, 5,000 people like my image.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. 5,000 people hit the like button, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they like the image. They could like you. They could be a friend of yours,
Mm-hmm.
and they just go, oh, hey, my friend posted a new picture. I like it. Well, did you really like it? I don't know. Regardless, if it works the other way, if nobody likes it, and this is the other side of social media, if nobody likes it, then is it unimportant? Is it bad work? This is the sort of great fallacy or great letdown of social media, is it props us up, but it can also tear us down. And in reality, neither one of those things have anything to do with how good the work is or how important the work is.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder sometimes if you had to create for an entire year and you couldn't share anything until, say, January 1st the following year.
Mm-hmm. Nothing?
Nothing. Like,
not even, hey, I'm working on some new stuff. It's going really well. Not even progress reports?
No. You go dark for a year, and on the first of the next year you can share things.
So it's not that you're not making for a year. You're still making.
No.
You just
No.
can't share any of it until it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way it used to be, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I flirt with the idea of, and this will, I'm sure, come as no shock to you, but I flirt with the idea of deleting everything, of burning it all down and starting again.
Mm-hmm.
What keeps me from doing it is, well, a couple things, but the main thing is I don't know how it would be any different than what it is now, because I'm still me.
Sure.
So if all I'm doing is just deleting the history, but then creating a similar history, what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I wonder sometimes, like, when, I've released elements of projects before and haven't received the response that I probably have hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
And that has changed how I looked at the project itself.
Right.
It's one of those where you begin to distrust your own opinion or your own judgment on the project.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that, like, if you're sharing work and sharing, progress report, like, yeah, I almost feel like how much of your work going forward is then influenced by the response you get in that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, all I can tell you is I'll let you know, because I think part of the reason, it's a small part, but it still factors in, but part of the reason that I want to try this alternative sort of printing process is to do something unexpected and to do something I've never done, and to see how that influences or informs or not the things that I have done. Does that take me in a new direction? Does it elicit a different response because it's different work from me? I don't know. Does it find its way to a new audience? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or am I just more, and I hate to use the word passionate about it, if I produce more of that type of work because it resonates with me, is that what made the audience? Is the consistency what helped capture a new audience as much or more than just the work? I don't know. I mean, these are all variables that I think, again, distract us just from doing the work, because we're thinking about all this stuff. We're thinking about how it's going to be received instead of just making the work.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking at this photographer's formulary kit in my cart for the past 4 days. Still haven't pulled the trigger on it. Why? I don't know. What if people don't like it? What if I don't like it? What if, all this dumb stuff that bounces around in my head. But I'm never going to know unless I try. They're never
Mm-hmm.
going to know unless they see.
Yeah.
So the only person that's missing out, well, we're all missing out. I'm missing out on the process. I'm missing out on potential inspiration. They're missing out on, potentially something cool to hang on their wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you think how do you overcome that?
In general or specifically?
How about both? I don't know.
Specifically, I think, there are like 4 shopping carts that I have today that I have to pull the trigger on, and I've given myself, sort of an assignment. In general, I think it's just, I think it all feeds off of itself. The more I try and do, and the more, and again, this is the wrong word, but the more successes I have in trying and doing, the more that reinforces the carrot, not the stick.
Mm-hmm.
But the common, if there is a common negative to all of this, it's that I am noticeably less inspired, less happy, less content, less everything when I'm not making. And that making could be writing, photographing, painting. It's not one aspect of it. It's just the act of having conversations. It's the act of doing nothing but stewing over all of those things really takes me down very quickly.
Do you think having to knowing that your creations and whatever you're going to do be public, does that have any impact on your work?
No. Because I don't I don't count on them finding an audience.
Fair enough.
I've been at this, I've been doing podcasts since 2008. I've had, multiple iterations of websites, and I'm still sort of hovering at the same relative. I mean, it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less, but mine is a long game. I have not ever had some sort of meteoric rise to, social media greatness or social media fandom or, like any sort of that. And I'm okay with it because I think that would negatively influence the work more than my own self-doubt about the work.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because I would fall into that trap of, oh, well, the audience likes this, so I'm just going to keep doing this. Well, if you keep doing that, then you're not doing any of this stuff over here, and arguably you're not growing because you're not off balance.
Mm-hmm. I would curious to know what would happen if you became famous.
I don't ever think I'll have to worry about it. I mean, I don't know. I hope that it wouldn't. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it, like I said, I don't see it happening. I mean, what am I going to be famous for? Certainly not podcasting, and certainly not painting, and certainly not photography. So what would it be? I don't know. And what is famous? What does that mean? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Unless my movie gets picked up, and then, then maybe I would be. But other than that, I don't know.
And you never know. Like, there's enough people get famous for all sorts of reasons.
Well, if I can get my script to Josh Brolin and he digs it, I'll let you know.
See, I kind of pictured you more as a Wes Anderson guy.
Oh, no. No, this is no. I like some of his stuff, but I also find some of his stuff very difficult to watch. I love the way it's shot. I love the precision in which it's shot, but some of the characters, it just drives me crazy.
I can see that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he kind of does the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, he does. He created a full formula, and now he just makes Wes Anderson movies.
Right. I mean, if I could pattern a film career like a director, it would probably be Fincher.
Okay.
Because there is that fastidious attention to detail. There is an inherent sort of darkness to everything he does, but there's humor in it as well. It's just dark humor. And I love the types of human conditions that he explores in his movies.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You've been dreaming of making a movie, or is that just a abstract?
I've had a couple ideas for movies. There's one that I keep coming back to, and I have started making notes about it. I've started sort of outlining an arc, because I really do love the writing process, and I think the more I started doing these morning pages November 5th, and I have not missed them at all. So I'm well over 100 pages into this new journal, which is phenomenal for me. I still, I'm almost halfway through a Moleskine journal since November, which kind of blows me away, given that I've had, dozens of these things empty for so long. And that act of, this is kind of an interesting thing. The act of writing without consequence has allowed me to feel more comfortable about writing with purpose.
Okay. Yeah.
Just getting something out on the page and not really, because I don't go back and read them. I couldn't tell you what I wrote about day before yesterday. No idea. It's a complete mystery to me, because I sit down and I just go, and I stop when I hit 3, and that's it. And then I close the book and I don't think about it. I try not to anyway, but within a day or two, I'm completely oblivious to what I've written. So, I mean, I could be writing the same thing over and over. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be funny? Like a Groundhog Day journal. Like it's just the same. It's the same. Like every second or third entry is the same because I
Yeah.
can't remember writing about it.
Yeah. I know you're not supposed to do this, but it'd be fascinating for you to go back and read those.
It might be, or it might be disturbing. You know, because I do know that some of them have been, I've been kind of wiped after it. I mean, some of them are kind of like therapy sessions, you know, where I'm just working through some stuff. But I think that's part of the point, getting some of this stuff out so that I don't sit and spiral around it. You know, I don't sit and think about it all the time. And I love the idea of doing, you know, something fiction, you know. So I'm outlining some things, and I thought, well, what if I could write 3 pages of fiction a day on this particular story? That's a screenplay in 6 weeks, at least a first draft.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting prospect. I've shared the idea with Adrian and one other friend, my friend Jude, and he loved it. He was like, I can totally see this. I can absolutely see this. So I don't know. We'll see. I love the idea of writing a fiction piece, just if nothing else, as an exercise.
Mm-hmm. So you said that basically the act of writing with no consequence has allowed you to write with purpose.
Yeah, starting to. Yeah.
Do you think there's a corollary to other forms of creating? Like,
gosh, you know, maybe.
Is there a way to create morning pages but painting, or
well, I think that's part of what the Instagram live sessions are. You know, I think that's a big part of what those are, is just giving myself permission to play. And I think all of us as makers of things lose that ability, or lose that permission to a lesser or greater degree, depending on where we are in our career. But I think it's valuable. One of the guys that I watch, a guy named Bob Burridge, older fellow, has been painting for a long time, is fascinated with the circus. A lot of his paintings, the subject matter of a lot of his paintings are circus clowns and circus performers. And it's something that has been with him since he was a kid. I got the chance to meet him at the Smithsonian last year, and had a nice conversation with him about some of this stuff. And I asked him, you know, because he did like a little Q&A after a painting session, and I asked him what came first, the circus or painting, and he got this smile on his face, and he's like, that's a great question. He's like, the circus, you know, ever since I was a kid. And he told this story about wanting to run off and join the circus, and that fascination with the big top, and with those performers, and with the makeup, and with the spectacle, and the lights, and the smells and the sounds. That's something that has never left him, and it pervades every part of his work. And his morning pages, if you will, routine is getting up every day and just playing and making collages, or doing these sort of you know, non-directional abstract paintings or color studies. But it's something he does every single day, and he will tell you that is what allows him to create the better work, the more meaningful work. His urgency is not sharing, his urgency is making. So he makes every day, regardless of where it ends up, and that allows the important work to find its way through. And I think it's such a great way to look at it. I've started to do stuff like that, but you know, I'm not quite there yet, but I can see definitely where it helps.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm trying to think of how if I were to do something similar, what would that process look like?
Well, I think you do. Yeah. I mean, when you know, one of the first things that we talked about when we first kind of started talking and becoming friends was the Mummers Day parade. And you brought like 20 rolls of film. Well, that's practice. That's giving yourself the chance to just play and see what you see, without going, okay, I need to come home with a roll of really good portraits today, or really good city scenes, or whatever it is. you routinely give yourself permission to just go out and make pictures without any agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Do you not see it that way? When you're sort of in the moment, are you trying to be more purposeful? Am I just seeing it that way because I'm on the outside of it?
I think I mean, this might actually go back to a conversation we had last week, but I think some of my mental struggles have been that as I've sort of become, as I gotten older through the years, I've become more definite with what I need to come back with. I like the trip out west. I had an idea what I wanted to come back with,
Mm-hmm.
but like months before I went on that journey. And I think some of my struggles with that trip was the fact that I came into it with an expectations, which then almost impedes my ability to look at what's in front of me and just react to that, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to being in the if you want to say pure moment.
Well, you had a rough reaction to that, though. I mean, you came back from that really kind of bummed out that you didn't get what you wanted, and as a result of it, you haven't shot a whole lot since.
No, but I've had similar sort of like with this, but particularly with the Mummers Parade, because that is, if you want to say that is a singular event that sort of plays to what I do incredibly well. Just colors and chaos and people, and like, it in terms of like a playground for the work I create, I can't ask for a better playground than the
Mm-hmm.
Mummers Parade.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely come back from a few Mummers Parades where it was like what I came back with wasn't what I had hoped it was. I brought 20 rolls of film, and I was hoping that I would get to the day where I was like, I'm out of film and I still want to shoot. But like, maybe the light hasn't been right. Maybe these could, last year it was 4 degrees.
Right.
Like, so your ability to shoot in 4 degrees is pretty hampered.
Right.
So like, you're correct in that I definitely take a far more playful attitude, or have taken a far more playful attitude in the past. And I wonder if like some of it is because I'm looking at this parade as like, here's this chance for me to produce a body of work, or produce something that may, back to the monetization, may get people attention
Mm-hmm.
in a way that I haven't achieved before.
Do you feel like you've spent too much time worrying about what an audience is going to think, or not enough time in terms of what type of work you're producing? Is an audience like, are you, and I don't think there's a wrong answer, and I don't think there's a wrong way to look at it, but are you trying to create work for you or for an audience?
I think that if you want to say, this entire conversation is largely me getting mad at myself for paying too much attention to what the audience wants,
Mm-hmm.
and not enough time focusing and producing the work that I want to create.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I don't mean that to sound as arrogant as it probably comes off, but
You dick.
but yeah. But I think each artist, people respond to the work because it's from the artist.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, something in their head, wants to get out. And personally, I feel that I get so caught up in the like social media world, the audience world, everything, that I don't put in the effort required to get 100% of what's in my head out in the world. And maybe this whole conversation is basically me taking out my feelings on myself on social media or like the topic itself. But I feel that I'm letting myself down by not putting all my efforts into creating the work that's bouncing around my head.
So what's stopping you? I mean, that's the pointed question, right? What,
Yeah.
you haven't shot. I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot here,
Yeah.
and I know you know where this is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
You haven't shot anything really since you got back.
Mm-hmm.
Because that trip kind of knocked the wind out of your sails in terms of what you were expecting to get.
Yeah.
So what's the hump that you need to get over to get back out there again?
Me gaining a healthy, not caring attitude about anything but the work.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in a lot of ways coming back to conversation last week. I'm almost getting to the point where if I get paid for my work, I get paid for work. I like it. That almost look at that as a byproduct of my work that I can't control. It's out of my hands. I can control some aspects in terms of having things people could buy, but I need to focus on producing work and producing the best work that I can. And if things happen monetarily, so be it. Accepting the fact that they're out of my control and getting into that headspace that will allow me to freely create without the expectations that I've placed on the work in the past.
Mm-hmm. How close are you to that now?
I think I'm fairly close. Mentally, I met like even just getting back into podcasting and talking to you has been helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of now sitting down and going, this is what I want to accomplish. This is how I want to do things, and then doing it. And I'm at the point where I'm sort of trying to figure out like what's the work I want to do. What's the steps that I want to start walking towards.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a far better place than like I was, say, a couple months ago.
Right.
But I view sort of a lot of what I've done on the social media platforms as me just treading water instead of swimming to someplace, and that I need to just put my head down and just focus on the work and just crank it out, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all you can do, because otherwise, when you stay in this space of being beholden to an audience, and for some it really works, but I think for you, from what I'm hearing and from what you've said in other conversations, it's taken the fun out of photography for you, and
Mm-hmm.
you enjoy photography more than almost anybody I know. So that's a huge loss.
Yeah. I mean, my personality is I'm easily distractible. That's always been my knock.
Right.
I've gotten my GPA in college was significantly lower simply just by the fact that I would get distracted and taking tests or zone out or do something like that.
Right.
And it's so like I see myself so easily just hitting the point where it's like, what are everyone talking about on the internet? Like
a squirrel.
Oh yeah, or I'll post a new picture and like, oh, what's the response? Oh, there's a new picture. I've never seen that photography before. 10 minutes later, I'm like, the plus side of that is like, I have the ability to pull from so many different places because I've looked at and experienced and understand and read up on so many different things because so many things have caught my attention. But like in terms of me just flat out producing work, I get too distracted too often by unimportant things.
Right. Well, that's the other side of that sort of influence sphere, right? Is because you have such a wide net of what your experience is and what your influences are, you get it's that much easier to pull your attention.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's one of those where, like, because I put it the wide net, I'm catching everything. Your old shoe, plastic, a whale, like,
Everything but a camera.
Yeah, exactly. Everything except for dollar bills. That's where I'm, sort of my feelings on that.
Right.
When I look at that important versus urgent, I'm spending way too much time on the urgent part, or what feels to be urgent, and not enough time on what's important.
If you're enjoying the conversation so far and you'd like to keep listening, you can subscribe to In Between in iTunes or in your favorite podcast app. Or you can get it as part of my Everything feed, which also includes process-driven, iterations, and anything else I happen to put up. Just search for Jeffrey Sadoris Everything. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at Jeffrey Sadoris, that's JeffreySadoris, or on my website at jeffreysadoris.com. And if you'd like to see what John is up to, you can find him on Instagram at John Wilkening, that's JONWILKENING, or by visiting his website at johnwilkening.com. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk to you on the next one.